Good afternoon again. Welcome. My name is Ben Sands, and it is a pleasure and an honor to be here with you today. We're going to talk about something that is near and dear to my heart. Those of you who have been following me online know how much I care about having a plan and its importance in our lives as it relates to moving forward and ultimately creating what we're really after, the outcomes that we aspire to. So this is going to be an action-packed, high-engagement webinar, a lot of stuff to cover, and I want to walk you through a plan, an approach, a framework that I personally use and I teach at organizations around the world on how to create highest levels of engagement, performance, and impact, not just today, but over the course of your entire year and ultimately your entire life. A couple of things to be clear about in terms of the webinar itself, the technology itself. I mentioned it's a new technology for me. There's a chat function that I will try to follow, but I can't commit or promise that I will see the chat questions as they come up. But if you have a question, use that chat function. At the end of the webinar, I'll go back, I'll take a look at all the chat questions and answer them for however long it takes. In addition, you can type in a question at the bottom of the screen and I can get to that as well. But for the most part, for the first 45 minutes or so of the webinar, I'm going to be totally focused on delivering the content and then we'll pull up and do a little Q&A. All right, let's dive in. For those of you who don't know me all that well, Sands Leadership, my company has one single big, hairy, audacious goal, and that is a fully engaged world. I have cared deeply about this issue ever since I became a professional. The question that started it all is, what's the difference between men and women who wake up every day energized and excited by the work that they do and the life that they live? What differentiates them from everybody else? And when I was in my early 20s, I saw a lot of the everybody else and not too much of the aspirational, energized and excited professional. So that kind of began a lifelong sort of quest for answers. And now today, all of my work centers around creating this fully engaged world, a world in which more men and women wake up every day energized and excited by the work that they do and the life that they live. I bring this message. I work with companies and organizations around the country and around the world who essentially share this same vision, a few of those at the bottom of the screen. I also do a lot of this kind of work where I'm working with men and women who just want answers, who want to move their lives forward. And that's what we're here to do today, is to bring some of the ideas and concepts that big organizations have tapped into to you in your personal and professional life, with the hope of helping you to create the fully engaged life that you're after. Now, a couple of starting assumptions, really important foundational ideas that establish everything we're going to talk about today. So let me quickly click through these starting assumptions. Number one, I have a deep belief that you have unique gifts. You're intelligent, you're driven, and you have access to resources that 99% of the world would kill to have access to. If any of these, by the way, if any of these starting assumptions are not true, just hang up, log out, whatever, because this webinar is just not going to be for you, but not going to be relevant for you. But I know everybody who's reading my work, it falls into this category of uniquely gifted. Number two, I assume that you want to live a fully engaged life, a life characterized by purpose, impact, and prosperity. Three, deep-seated belief that full engagement makes families healthier, companies stronger, and the world a better place. That's essentially, it's why I do what I do. A fully engaged world is nothing but means to an end, which is healthier families, stronger companies, and a better, frankly, more peaceful and prosperous world. Number four, this may not be as obvious to you. Engagement is your responsibility and in your control. I think this is one of the biggest misunderstandings about engagement, a myth or an issue that's pervasive in our corporate culture today, that somehow engagement is the company's responsibility, that somehow engagement is your boss's job. I'm sorry, it's just not, it doesn't work that way. And we're going to talk about why it doesn't work that way, and specifically how this whole process maps back to you feeling more in control and ultimately more capable of creating the level of engagement and performance that you aspire to. That, not surprisingly, your company would love to see as well. And then last but not least, better, more thoughtful personal planning is where to start, right? In the quest for a fully engaged world, in the quest for a fully engaged life, it starts with a plan. And that's what we're going to get into today. So let's start with a quick question. Do you have a plan so far or for this year? Did you set and write down formal goals at the start of the year? Take a second right now. There's actually a poll set up on the webinar at the bottom. You'll see a little poll comment, and it says, did you set and write down formal goals this year? Take a second to vote. Yes, no, can't remember. Awesome. I see the numbers coming in. Beautiful. I asked this question a lot during this particular talk, and wanted to share some of the data that I've collected over the last year or so in asking this question. And it's pretty consistent with data that I've collected over the last few years. And that is, on average, most people do not set and write down formal goals. Now, this said at the start of the year. The reality is it could be any time over the course of the year. But with just under 500 people in this particular data set, a large majority of the men and women with whom I work don't set goals. And that is confusing. Whenever I see this data, the follow-up, sort of the rhetorical question I ask is, what would it feel like? What would you do if you worked for a company or a manager that didn't set goals, that didn't have a plan? You walk in your boss's office and say, hey boss, what are we trying to accomplish today, this week, this quarter, this year? And he said, yeah, let's wing it. It's kind of like a Michael Scott scenario, right? Your head's gonna explode. Long story short, you wouldn't want to work for this particular person. Long story short, you wouldn't feel all that energized and excited to show up for work the next day and the day after that. So here's the question: why do we tolerate a lack of rigor in our personal lives that we never accept at work? How does that work? This is a question I've been scratching my head on for a long time. And again, the deep-seated conviction that men and women like us, men and women who have the intelligence, the drive, and the access to resources to truly make an impact in this world, essentially must bring a higher level of rigor and discipline to our personal lives in order to continue to move forward personally and professionally, and ultimately to move the world forward in a meaningful way. And that brings us back to this sort of key idea that experience alone is not enough. And a lot of men and women say, you know what, I know I'm learning, I know I'm growing, I'm working so hard, right? There's nothing else but learning and growth taking place. But the problem is experience just isn't enough, right? It's only when you evaluate that experience, when you extract the lessons learned, and when you apply that new information, that growth occurs. And that, over time, what we're all really after, mastery, rare and valuable skill, that emerges. So this approach, this new way to think about your life, your performance planning, as I like to call it, is designed to help you, first and foremost, identify and reflect on the key lessons learned, the critical or most important experiences that you've had, and then ultimately apply that experience in a meaningful way to create a new, better plan to move yourself forward personally and professionally. Now, before we get into the new approach, the first question that needs to be addressed is, why are we here? Why don't we plan? Why don't many people plan more frequently? Why don't we do this more frequently? And the answer there is pretty simple. Traditional goal setting, the kind of January objective identification process that many of us are familiar with, just doesn't work for most people the way we wish it would. Now, it's not that it doesn't work, it just doesn't work the way we'd like it to. And let me give you a couple of examples of how this plays out, how traditional goal setting falls short of getting us what we're really after. So this is an example. This is a client of mine. Again, one of these individuals who are disproportionately bright, driven, and have access to resources that 99% of the world would kill to have access to. This person came out of college, a couple of master's degree, economics, environmental science, and had a very specific aspiration to become the president's energy advisor. Just kind of crazy, because this guy actually had a chance, an opportunity to become, to get this role, which sort of blows my mind. But as we dug into this, I was just asking kind of what he was trying to accomplish and what his objectives were going forward. This is what he shared. As we dug into it, what we discovered is that he wasn't actually after the title energy advisor. He was after something different. Let me explain. I call this the mistake that we all make. And the mistake at a high level is that we set goals that are things, right? A new job title, a new salary level, maybe it's a new relationship, a new baby, without considering more specifically the feelings that we're after. So let me explain how this worked with this young man who wanted to become the president's energy advisor. So he starts with this goal. My first question to him was why? Right? Why do you want to be the president's energy advisor? Now, as you can imagine, I got a nice little eye roll. And he said, well, duh, it's cool. And more importantly, I want to save the planet, right? I want to very committed to the environment and preservation. As we dug into that, I followed up and I said, well, why does that matter to you? And this began a really extraordinary exploration of who this guy is and what he really wanted out of life. So here's how it went in a nutshell. Why do you want to save the planet? His first response was, because I have the ability. Okay, why does that matter? Because I want to have a major impact. Okay, why does major impact matter to you? This is all sort of a short summary of our conversation. Because, and this was unexpected, girls love guys who do big things, who have major impact. So we started off with, I want to save the planet. Then this single guy ultimately gets to, girls love guys who do big things. What's this guy really after? Well, after a couple of questions, what I discovered is that he's looking for love. We kept going. Why else do you want to save the planet? His next answer, the earth is getting its butt kicked. I said, okay, well, why does that matter to you? The earth is an underdog. All right, as a coach, when I hear underdog, my ears go up. I followed up, why does underdog matter to you? Because I'm an underdog. It turns out that this guy grew up in a situation where he was surrounded by, young men and women who had means and resources that far exceeded his own. He grew up feeling like an underdog. So now we discover that he's associating that same sense of underdoggedness, right, with the situation that the planet is in. So what's he really after? Significance. We kept going. Why else do you want to save the planet? Why do you want this job? Because energy expertise will always be in high demand. Why does that matter? I'll never have to worry about finding a job. What's he really after? Security. And then finally, the energy space is exciting. Why does that matter to you? Because I'm bored in my current role. What's this guy really after? He's really after growth. The mistake that we all make is that we identify thing goals, right? A title, an experience, a salary, but fail to consider what we're really after. And what we're really after are the feelings that we associate with achieving that thing. Now, understanding this is absolutely essential to setting better goals, to creating a better plan that ultimately gets you what you're really after. Now, I put together another example of goal setting gone bad because this is a very common one. In fact, I suspect that folks on this call, if pressed, would have identified, I want to get promoted at some point this year as a thing goal. And again, similar way that this all plays out, the goal of promotion also typically maps back to those same 4 common objectives: security, significance, love, and growth. These shared goals are essentially what make us human, right? These 4 foundational objectives, the feelings that we're all after. Number 1, security, certainty, stability, the ability to avoid pain. Number 2, love, deep personal connection with others. Number 3, significance, to matter, to be important, to feel valued. And last but not least, growth, to feel like we are learning, evolving, making progress, moving forward. These are our shared goals. It's what makes us human. This is, for psychology majors in the group, this is a manifestation of Maslow's hierarchy of need. Understanding this, as simple as it may seem, is absolutely essential to getting what we're really after, to creating more effective and efficient strategies for achieving the outcomes, that high-level outcome, to wake up every day energized and excited by the work that we're doing and the life that we're living. Now, these shared goals make us human, right? We all share them. And if you have any question about this, just try to imagine your life without one of these 4 things. Imagine a life with lots and lots of love, significance, and growth, but no security. Imagine a life with lots and lots of growth, love, and security, but no sense of significance. It's almost hard to imagine, right? It's a non-starter. I often refer to these as the buckets, as the buckets that we carry around in life. And at any given point in time, these buckets are more or less full. And whenever one of these buckets gets too low, right? When it's not full enough, we experience pain. Now, if you showed up on today's call because there's something that doesn't feel right, because there's something that doesn't, because there is some sort of pain in your life, chances are it maps back to the lack of one of these 4 or all of these 4 feelings. Take a second right now. Just process this in the context of your own personal and professional experience. When you have been most satisfied, most fulfilled, most content, most energized, I want to suggest that you were, more specifically, feeling high levels of security, love, significance, and growth. And during those periods in your life, when things weren't going so well, during those periods in your life when you were anxious or bored or uncertain or fearful, that more specifically, you were missing one or more of these key components. These are what make us human, and these are our shared goals. Now, this makes us the same, but what makes us different? What makes us different are our values. Now, values are incredibly misunderstood, right? Often talked about, but often misunderstood. I have a very simple way of defining what a value is, and specifically, it's the feelings, principles, and or outcomes that we prioritize. There are lots and lots of quote unquote values: honesty, trust, truthfulness, energy, passion, love, kindness, right? You name it. There's about 190 different values by my last count. What makes us different are the values of all of those, the 190 values, the ones that we as individuals prioritize. And if you're looking for an example of kind of how this plays out, look no further than our presidential politics or our politics in general. Right? I often like to say, whether you are Republican or Democrat, you want a country in which men and women feel secure. You want a country in which men and women feel a sense of love and connection to one another. You want a country in which every citizen feels a sense of significance, like they matter. And you want a country in which every citizen feels like they are growing, learning, evolving, and moving forward, right? That's the American dream. What makes us different as Democrats and Republicans ultimately is the values that we prioritize. Whether you are a Democrat or Republican, often maps back to some specific organization of your values. There's no right or wrong. It's just different. And my deep-seated, I don't want to get off on this tangent, but if more men and women understood this, I think more men and women would come to see the commonality between the parties and the platforms more easily than the differences. So our values are what makes us different, right? Can be easily identified as it relates to Democratic and Republican politics, but all of us as human beings have a set of core values. This on the right, these are actually my specific personal core values. This is a core value discovery process that I do with clients and companies. And after doing it for myself, these are the things that are most important to me. I share this not only because it's, I think, useful to understand how everything that I'm doing, everything I'm going to share with you today makes sense in the context of these personal core values, right? The number one being freedom, right? Love, accountability, efficiency, and courage. This whole planning process I constructed because I needed to figure out a way that I can achieve the outcomes personally and professionally that I aspire to, and do it in a manner consistent with my values. And that's ultimately what we're all really after. It's the secret to full engagement, right? It's an alignment between our goals, right? Those shared goals, the reasons, our reason why, right? Everything that we do, we can map back to the desire to increase the levels of security, love, significance, and growth in our life, right? Our goals, those four shared goals, that's our reason why. But in order to create full engagement, in order to wake up every day energized and excited to do the work that we have to do, to live the life that we want to live, we need alignment, not just with the goals, but with our values, right? The how, the process, the approach that we want to take, the principles that we apply. And then, of course, with the actions, the specific choices that we make, the decisions that we take. When people come to me saying, gosh, things are just not working out right, my first question is always, what do you think you're after? And they say, well, it doesn't matter. They're saying, well, let me tell you what I'm doing. And that's tempting to run or start with the actions, to start doing things differently. But my suggestion is that if you're not crystal clear on what your goals are, why you want to do what you want to do, and then secondly, what your values are, the specific way in which you must do things in order to feel comfortable and congruent, that by the action that you're choosing is essentially like throwing spaghetti against the wall, hoping something works, as opposed to intelligently identifying a strategy that will win for you. And that's what we're going to do in just a few minutes here. Show you how to do that. I call it the path to disengagement, right? Not knowing, a lack of clarity around these three questions, right? I don't know what I want. I don't know what's most important. I don't know what to do. Now, this may not be relevant to anyone on the call, but I guarantee you know somebody in your life that's struggling right now, that's uncertain. And chances are they're starting with, I don't know what to do. If you want to be a great friend, a great spouse, a great brother or sister, a great mom or dad, encourage them to start instead with clarifying what they want and what's most important. If you get those things right, figuring out what to do becomes easy. So that's what we're after. We're after integration, after alignment. Now, before we move on, just want to take a second to pressure test this, right? Give this some thought. How does this compare to your experience? Are you listening to this and nodding along and saying, yeah, absolutely? Or are you saying, I don't buy it? If you're saying, I don't buy it, no problem. My ask is write a note in the chat box or write a note in the question box and we can come back to it or clarify it as needed. How does this compare to your experience? My hope is that it's making a heck of a lot of sense. And if it does, then it's time to move in to the working part of the work. The path to full engagement. This is a 5-step process. Frankly, I love 5-step processes. If you've been with me for a while, you probably have seen a variety of different 5-step processes. But this is the process that I personally use and teach to create a truly effective personal strategic plan. So let me click you through it quickly, and then we'll dive into the actual work itself. So number one, review and reflect. Right? As I mentioned at the start, experience alone is not enough. You must review and reflect on the experience to divine the lessons learned and then apply those moving forward. Part two, or step two, clarify the priorities. What's most important going forward? Three, once we've identified what's most important going forward, we need to identify those winning strategies, approaches that work. How do we create or identify tactics and strategies that give us the highest probability of getting what we're really after? Four, now we create the plan. What do I do first? What obstacles must I overcome? This planning process that I'm going to share with you is based on best practice in corporate strategic planning. I'm going to share or suggest a couple of questions to help you craft a plan that is more likely to overcome the common pitfalls and challenges that typically undermine our best intentions. And then part five, I think you're going to love this. It's a review and adjustment part of the process, and it uses an approach called daily questions. And I'm going to share some of these questions. And really, at the end of the day, it's step five that is the secret sauce. Step five that ensures that we continue this process, that it gets better and better, and that we follow through in this process. So excited to share that with you in just a second. So let's dive right in. Let's start the review and reflection process. Now, everybody, I mentioned this in the many emails that I sent out before the call. You've got a workbook. A lot of these questions are in the workbook. I know we're not going to have enough time to actually reflect and do or review and reflect on all of these questions right now in this hour. But my hope is that as soon as you get off the call, or at some point tonight, or at the very latest tomorrow morning, you'll take time to kind of walk through these questions and review them on your own, or even better, with a colleague, with a spouse, with a brother or sister, with a friend. So life KPIs, key performance indicators, a handful of critical KPIs as I think about it. 6 specifically listed here: your physical health, your emotional health, your personal finances, your rate of your personal growth, your relationships, and your work satisfaction. So what I did is I created a list of 10 or 12 questions. This is sort of the baseline. This is where I want you to start. And I want you to reflect on a scale of 1 to 5, where 5 equals very true. How true is each sentence in your life today? Right? So here are the questions. I feel physically healthy. I feel emotionally healthy. I'm on track financially. Right? 1 to 5. How true is that statement? 1, not true. 5, very true. I feel like I'm learning and growing. I feel a high level of love and connection. I love what I do. I'm energized and excited to go to work every day. 1 to 5, what's the baseline? What's your starting point right now? September 7th, 2016. And then the last couple of questions, I feel a high level of purpose and meaning in my life. And then one sort of overall question, I feel like the past 3 months have been the best of my life. 1 to 5. How true are these statements? Now, 1 to 5, 1 to 10, this is not a highly analytical or data intensive process, right? It's a completely subjective evaluation of how you're feeling right now at this moment at 4:20 Eastern time, 4:30 Eastern time. But my view is that by putting numbers, by putting metrics to these questions, it gives you a starting point. And my push for anyone who's really serious about moving their life forward, use data, even if it's not perfect data. Get it down, start somewhere, and then improve, and then get it right. So take a second to evaluate. 1 to 5, how are you feeling? Now, let's provide a little bit more qualitative insight. Reflecting on the last 90 days, let's go a little deeper. Of what are you most proud? What were or are your key accomplishments? When were you most excited or bored? What relationships got stronger? What relationships got weaker? When were you challenged? What didn't happen that you hoped would? What have been the key lessons learned? What were the most important books or other resources that you consumed? What made you angry? When did you say yes when you should have said no? When did you say no when you should have said yes? Now, if you're looking at this list and scratching your head, that's okay. I know I'm putting you on the spot right now with these questions. Again, that's okay. You may not be able to answer all of these questions right now. In fact, you may never be able to answer these questions as it relates to the last 90 days. But again, my push is do your best. I like to actually use my calendar. I'll go back through the calendar and just look at some of the things that happened to remind myself of what happened. Now that I do this professionally and I teach this, I can start to keep a record of this. I ask these questions every week so that I can keep a running and accurate list of what's happening in my life, so I can capture those experiences and extract the insight. I also want to hold myself accountable. Important books and other resources. One of the reasons I ask that is because I know everybody on this call is consuming a lot of content. Maybe blogs, Facebook, social media, books, podcasts, whatever. The question that I started, asking myself is, how much of the time that I'm spending consuming content is actually moving me forward? All things being equal, what's the most important stuff that I need to be feeding my mind, feeding my brain, feeding my soul, feeding my spirit? How do I learn? It's through these kinds of questions that you can really gain the insight that you need to take what I suspect is a very good life and turn it into something extraordinary. So the review and reflection process starts here, right? Highlights, lessons learned. What did you learn and learn about yourself over the last 90 days? Again, you'll hear me beat this drum all the time. This is a personal process, right? This is for you. But if you want to deepen a relationship, either personal or professional, do this together and share your answers. It's one of my favorite activities to do in team environments or leadership retreats and that kind of thing. Because on one hand, yes, you're establishing yourself, you're doing this for you, but there's so much that we can learn about ourselves in sharing our information with others. So lots of questions to ask. A question you may follow up with is why, right? Why so many questions, right? And the reason, sort of threefold. We ask these questions, number one, because what we don't know can hurt us. What we don't know can hurt us. At this point in our personal and professional lives, not knowing is no longer an excuse. When you don't know, you fall behind. When you don't know, you miss out. What we don't know can hurt us. Two, there are things that we'll never know unless we ask. We have to create this process, create this questioning framework, just so that we ensure that we understand that we know what we need to know. Right? We have to ask the questions in order to discover the answers. And last but not least, we won't ask unless we plan to ask. Right? Unless this becomes hygienic, unless you start doing this review and reflection on a regular basis. And it doesn't have to be every week, but at minimum every quarter. It's unlikely that you're going to be asking the questions and ultimately learn what you need to learn in order to move yourself forward. So why ask these questions? 3 reasons. All right, part 2, or step 2 in this process, clarifying priorities. I have a really simple approach to clarifying priorities. Right? As you're thinking about this over the next 90 days, you can't prioritize everything. And my push is going to be start with one specific area. So do a simple force ranking process. Right? Which of these statements is most true? I feel a high level of security, love, significance, growth. Right? It's the bucket question again. Essentially what I'm asking you to say is, all things being equal, what bucket is most full right now? And conversely, what bucket is least full? I do a little force ranking. So you'd score 1, 2, 3, 4. You can only use each number once. 4 is the bucket that is most full. 1, the bucket that's least full. Take a second right now. Just make a note on your notes. What are you feeling the most today? What are you feeling the least of today? Now, if you want to get, even deeper, you could separate out personal and professional. Which of these needs, which of these feelings are being met at the highest level at home and or at work? Now, of course, I group them together because it's hard sometimes to separate home and work. But if you want to get even more specific, what's most true? In this regular hygienic planning process, my suggestion is the bucket that is least full is your new number one priority. Simple concept. You want your goal for the next 90 days? Fill the bucket. Now, the challenge is that you have to fill that bucket without compromising the levels in the other buckets, right? You have to create a higher level of growth without necessarily compromising your sense of security. You have to create higher levels of significance and respect without compromising the love and connection that you feel for yourself and others. That's where the nuance is. And that's why we need to identify what I call winning strategies, right? Ways to fill any one of these buckets in a constructive and positive way. Critically, a strategy or approach, a tactic to fill a bucket that doesn't compromise the levels in these other key areas, doesn't undermine your ability to achieve these other goals. So let's talk about what these winning strategies are and how to identify them. So winning strategies, high level, it's a proven method for achieving our goal. Now the goal, remember the goals, right? A proven method for achieving a higher level or a sense of security. A proven method for increasing the levels of love and connection, of significance and of growth that you're feeling in your life, right? Those are the goals that we're talking about. The tactics are these winning strategies. So how do we identify proven methods? Well, we got to look for proof. Now, the proof that we're looking for is there are examples of it all around us, right? And the Donkey Kong strategies that I'm warning about here are really important. We got to beware of these Donkey Kong strategies, because Donkey Kong strategies are those tactics, strategies that are fun to talk about but hard to execute. A winning strategy is a high probability strategy. A Donkey Kong strategy, low probability. And here are a few common, what I refer to as Donkey Kong strategies. The goal is to feel a higher degree of physical health or security. What's the Donkey Kong strategy? I'm going to sign up for and run a marathon. Maybe the goal is to increase your sense of significance. How am I going to do that? Well, I'm going to start a new business. End up on the cover of Fast Company or Inc. Maybe the goal is to grow. I'm going to quit my job and travel around the world. That will lead to growth. These are Donkey Kong strategies because they sound really sexy. And even worse, if you share with a friend that, hey, I'm going to start a company, or I'm going to run a marathon, or I'm going to quit my job and travel around the world, unfortunately, that friend is likely to be like, wow, that sounds awesome. And boom, you've gotten your shot of dopamine. You've gotten the reaction that you're after, right? People like this. People like you. Unfortunately, the execution on these Donkey Kong strategies is far, far harder and much more likely to end up compromising your ability to meet all of your goals at a high level. So how do we find better winning strategies? I like to use role models. Now, role models are people who have successfully accomplished what you hope to achieve, right? Men and women who, whether you know them or not, appear or seem to have the level of security, love, significance, and growth in their life that you would aspire to have. On the left-hand side of the page, just a random selection of men and women whom other folks who I've done this process with, who they've identified as role models. Take a second to think, who are your role models? Who today is living a life or has lived a life that you aspire to emulate? Who today has had the kind of impact, has been able to build the kind of relationships, has been able to achieve the level of security that you would hope to have or build or achieve? Who are your role models? I think it's absolutely essential that we have role models. You think that is a little kid's thing, right? Something that we're taught when we're 6, 7, 8 years old. But role models matter just as much at this stage in our life. Because not only do they inspire us to a certain extent, but even more importantly, they help us to understand or identify the path to getting there. And in order to determine that path, we have to ask some specific questions of these role models. And on the right-hand side of this page, a few of the questions that I like to ask. Now, this list of questions is in your workbook, so you have all of these. I'm not going to spend too much time here. But ultimately, you want to sort of reverse engineer their path. How did they get to where they are? Because chances are they didn't just show up overnight where you now know that they are, right? There's no such thing as an overnight success. What I want to know, what you want to know is, what were they doing when they were your age? What were they doing when they were in your position? What were the most important decisions or choices, commitments that they made? What did they say yes to? What did they say no to? And we can use that as guidance. It's not like we're going to follow their path exactly, but we use that as guidance, as input, as data to help us refine our understanding of what works and what doesn't. Now, reflecting on our role models, but also just leveraging your personal experience. It's time to brainstorm a list of winning strategies. And this is going to be a to-do for you. When you get off the call, as part of this process, I want you to come up with your personal list of winning strategies based upon your role models and the exploration of what you know about what they have done, choices that they have made. And also, just in your experience, what are the decisions, the factors, the tactics, the strategies that lead you to highest levels of security, love, growth, significance? What makes you feel the way you want to feel? There's no need to reinvent the wheel here. Oftentimes, we just have to be reminded of the things that we already know work. So here's just an example of some of my winning strategies. Now, importantly, you'll see my values inserted here. These are winning strategies. Again, to be clear, they're winning strategies for me because they sync up with my values, right? If you were to say, a security strategy is to make, to earn an income of $10 million, right? That is a strategy, right? Maybe to become an investment banker. Right? That's a strategy for creating security. The problem is that strategy, specifically becoming an investment banker, becoming a partner at a law firm, that strategy won't work for me. Why not? Because of my core values. Number one being freedom. I personally, just because of who I am going to have a really, really hard time with any strategy that requires me to show up at a specific time every day, day in and day out, without the freedom and flexibility to essentially choose my own adventure. Now, that's neither right nor wrong. It's neither good nor bad. It's just who I am. But it's critical that as you're thinking about your winning strategies, you're being mindful that a strategy either will work for you or will not based upon your values. It is only a winning strategy if it syncs up with your values. So as it relates to the role models help me to generate a big long list of ideas. And then I filter that list. I process that list through my values, and I come up with this sort of master list of winning strategies. So a few that I have identified, and I'll highlight a couple, because chances are, if you're on this webinar and you like my writing, you like the stuff that I'm producing, chances are you share similar values. It's one of the reasons, if you like me, yeah, you do, because somehow, some way, our values are aligned. So a few winning strategies that have worked for me. Number one that I share with everybody. If you want to create security without compromising your freedom, build rare and valuable skill. People who are excellent at creating value that other people care about, solving problems, identifying opportunities, doing things that other people can't. Not only are they able to choose when, how, and where they work, but they typically experience the financial benefits of that as well. So one winning security strategy for me, a whole bunch of others on this list. Love and connection. Again, aligned with my winning strategies. Being there for my parents is a big deal for me. My parents are getting older. I love them to death. And being able to support and serve them is a huge deal to me. Asking better questions, I think, is one that I want to highlight, right? Being vulnerable, sort of midway through this list on the left-hand side. How often do you say, hey, how you doing? Right? And you don't really care, right? Or you're not really listening for an answer. It's more of just a gratuitous comment, right? You can deepen the level of love and connection in your life just simply by asking better questions and sharing more thoughtful, substantive answers. Significance. Easiest way in the world to create a sense of significance is to turn it external, is to make somebody else feel significant. You want to increase your feeling of significance without compromising your other goals. Tell somebody how they make a difference in your life, in your company. Make an effort every day to celebrate, to see and celebrate somebody else. I also suggest, third on this list, delivering great feedback. Man, the people who can give great feedback are the most valuable people in virtually every organization. But how few of us actually take the time to become masters at delivering feedback? Most of us run from it or avoid it at all costs. Somebody who can coach me, give me great feedback, is a hugely important person in my life. Finally, growth. Lots of ways to grow, right? Coaching, workshops. One of the ideas that I share a lot is this concept of deliberate practice, of really working on a skill. Almost bringing the analogy is like a woodworker or a craftsman, right? They typically spend years and years as apprentices learning a trade, learning a skill. And the way they learn is by doing something that's hard, screwing it up many times, but always looking for that incremental improvement and slowly but surely building that rare and valuable skill. So a few example winning strategies, things that work for me because they're consistent with my values. What are your winning strategies? Build this list for yourself, and then ultimately create a master list. I call this my cheat sheet. Whenever I'm not feeling the way I want to feel, the first thing I do is identify what's missing. What am I not feeling that I want to feel? And then I go to my list. What do I need? What do I know works? How do I get back to where I want to be? And these are some of my master winning strategies. All right, we're coming to the home stretch, creating the plan. Now, I mentioned that this process is sort of based on corporate best practice, strategic planning best practice. And I think that makes sense, right? We want to bring the same level of rigor to our personal life that we're very familiar with and comfortable with bringing to our professional life. So how do we create the plan? Well, remember the secret, right, is alignment. What we're after is integration between our goals, our values, and our actions. So our planning process needs to follow the same approach. Here's how I like to structure it. This isn't the most beautiful slide I've ever created, but you'll get the idea. So here we have a sort of a new version of that integration: goals, values, actions, all aligned. And I'm going to give you a very specific example. Goal: to increase the level of security that I feel. Values: I've shared these with you already. What's the action step? Here's a winning strategy. And this is a winning strategy, something that works for me. I suspect that at least a few folks on the line are thinking about security, and specifically financial security. If you want a winning strategy, it starts with knowing your numbers and specifically getting answers to what I call the 5 critical personal finance KPIs. Now, that's the action step. Before we start doing things, we need to ask 3 critical planning questions. I'm using critical a lot. Let's just call these the 3 important planning questions. Here they are. What does success look like? What roadblocks must I expect? And what are my specific first steps? Of these questions, well, they're all critical, but number 1 and number 2 are the most important. What does success look like? So if this winning strategy is to get answers to the 5 critical KPIs, let me just get clear on what that actually looks like. Specifically, it's I need to know my numbers. This is a subject of another webinar, but the 5 critical personal finance KPIs, in my opinion: how much money you're making, how much money you're spending, your income, expenses, how much money you're saving on a monthly basis, how much money you're giving away on a monthly basis, and then what I call the lifetime savings rate, which very quickly I add up all the money that I've earned over the course of my life, and I calculate my net worth, and then I divide that by all the money that I've earned over the course of my life. And I calculate a lifetime savings rate. It gives me a sense of how well I am doing at leveraging the resources that I've earned. So what does success look like? In this particular case, it's 5 freaking numbers, right? Now, what roadblocks must I expect? Well, I don't know how to calculate these numbers, right? How do you calculate lifetime savings rate? Oh, I got to call Ben and find that out, right? Or send him an email. How do I calculate my monthly savings? Should that include my 401k, right? These are questions that are going to come up. By asking these questions in advance in the planning process, I'm able to identify in advance what these issues are, and then, as it relates to my specific first steps, come up with a plan that's going to actually work. It's going to get me where I want to go. So roadblocks: I don't know how to calculate these numbers. This is the kind of thing that classic case of it's important, but it's always trumped by the urgent, priorities in our life. And then specifically in the case of me, I need buy-in from Sarah. Sarah's my wife, right? This is a family conversation as well. So what are my specific first steps going to be? Well, number 1, I want to address this idea that I don't know how to calculate these numbers. So I just sit there and I think for a second. I said, well, what would someone who's really smart do in this situation? Well, someone who's really smart in this situation would, first, get buy-in from his wife or spouse, right? That's anybody who's married knows that one. But second, right, schedule a call with a bookkeeper, right? Find somebody who knows how to do this stuff. And interestingly enough, that's exactly what I did. I called my business bookkeeper and I said, hey, I want to create essentially a personal finance dashboard. I need these 5 KPIs. Talk me through how we can make this happen. And she came up with a really awesome approach that uses mint.com and ultimately generates this dashboard for me every 3 months. It happens because I knew that I was going to fall short. I knew what roadblocks to expect. So this is the planning process. You identify the goal, make sure that you have in mind your values, and then ultimately the specific first step that you're going to take to move yourself forward. Once you identify that specific first step, the winning strategy, right, then you ask the planning questions to get to, the specific, the detailed, what am I going to do first? So that's our plan. Now that plan, like for example, that issue, if I was on point, I could execute against that in a weekend, right? And when I do, if in fact I have been successful, first and foremost, I ask, did that work, right? Do I feel more secure as a result of that tactic or strategy? And then 2, if yes or no, right, I then set a new target, right? Maybe I focus again on security, or maybe I focus on another one of my 4 common goals, but I can use that planning process to come up with a new approach for today, for this week, for this quarter, for this year. All right, I mentioned at the end, it all comes together with this review and adjustment process. And the approach that we use, that I use and believe in is what's called daily questions. Now, daily questions it's a process that I learned from one of my role models. I practice what I preach. A guy named Marshall Goldsmith is one of the world's, he is the world's #1 executive coach. He coaches literally dozens of CEOs in the Fortune 100. He is a master. He's about 65 years old, absolutely brilliant, and I have learned a ton from him. So when I was developing this approach, I, again, practice what I preach. I called him up and I said, hey, Marshall, I'd be honored, I'd be deeply grateful if you would take a look at this approach and tell me what you like about it and what's missing. And when he came back to me, we got on the phone and he talked me through, he gave me his feedback and he said, Ben, I love the approach. The only thing that's missing are daily questions. And that's where step 5 comes in. Now, here's what's really exciting about daily questions. It's the structure of the question. And the structure of the question is specific. Did I do my best to? Every one of these questions starts the same way. And the reason that matters is because it focuses not on the result, but on the effort. Did I do my best to set clear goals today? Did I do my best to make progress towards my goals today? Did I do my best to increase my sense of security, right? And so on and so forth. These are questions that I ask every single day. Marshall takes it a step further. He has a coach who actually calls him on the phone every night, wherever he is in the world, and records his answers. Scale of 1 to 10. 10 is absolutely, I knocked it out of the park. 1, I didn't make an effort at all. What these daily questions do is 3 things. 1, they reinforce our commitment and triggers. This is Marshall's book in which he describes this process, which is pretty awesome. They reinforce our commitment. They remind us that this matters, that this is important, and that more so than the result is the effort, is the sense of like, I am trying to do this. 2, they ignite our motivation where we need it. There's certain things that you just don't need any motivation to do. For me, exercise, right? I love exercise and I'm addicted to exercise. You don't have to twist my arm to get me out of bed and into the gym. But learning and growth, sometimes I half-ass it. Now I know I'm going to be asked at the end of the day, or I'm going to be asking myself at the end of the day, did I do my best to learn and grow? And that question prompts me to seek out opportunities that I wouldn't naturally or normally seek out. And lastly, they shrink these goals into achievable, measurable, effort-based metrics. I like the numbers. You know this. One of my core values is accountability. And another core value is efficiency. Setting goals every 6 months or every 12 months is extraordinarily inefficient and doesn't do anything from an accountability perspective. Instead, these daily questions allow me to kind of keep score every single day. And the best part, speaking of my efficiency value, it takes 2 minutes to quickly rattle through these questions. So how do you take this daily question process forward? My suggestion is find a coach. And I'm not selling myself. I actually don't do any personal coaching. But you have coaches all around you. This daily questions coach can be anyone. Enroll a colleague, a spouse, a boss. I love the idea of you have a 10, 12, 14-year-old child. They would be, I suspect, thrilled to be asking you these questions on a regular basis. And, wink, wink, what an example to set for them. Ask the daily question at the same time every day and record your numbers. Create a Google Doc, spreadsheet, something. Just keep the numbers. Again, it's not a perfect data set. It's not perfect data. It's not perfect science, but it allows you just to be able to ballpark or eyeball, am I getting better? Am I getting worse? And does this even matter? And then last but not least, establish some kind of accountability mechanism, with your coach, quote unquote, your colleague, spouse, boss, child. What are you going to do if you don't follow through? And how are you going to celebrate if you do, right? Establish some form of accountability mechanism, right? Step 5, the most important part of this process. Once you've identified your goals, once you've established that I am serious about moving forward, asking these questions regularly and focusing specifically on effort as opposed to results can ensure that you move forward in a meaningful way. 3 months from now, the test. We go back to these initial baseline questions. And it doesn't actually have to be in 90 days. It could be in 14 days, 2 weeks, could be in 10 days, could be in 30 days, whatever you want. But go back to these same questions. You've established the baseline today. Go back to these questions and ask them again and evaluate. Am I moving forward? Am I getting better in the ways that are most important to me? Most importantly, add in one final question. Do I feel the level of energy and excitement about my life that I aspire to feel? Am I waking up more energized, more enthusiastic, with a deeper sense of meaning and purpose today than I did 10 days ago, 30 days ago, 90 days ago? If at the end of this process you're like, nah, not so much, that's okay. This approach just doesn't work for you. And that's to be expected, right? There's definitely people on this call today for whom this approach won't work. And there's other people on this call for whom this approach just can't work. It's just too much, right? It's hard to follow through. But my hope is that there's 20, 40, 60% of the folks on this call will try this out, and that in trying it out will allow you to set yourself up for a close to 2016 and a 2017 that really are the best of your life. So that's all I got. The Catalyst sort of personal performance planning process. Now I want to just open it up to questions. I'm going to take a quick look. If you've got any questions, just send them along in the chat function. Or in the question box, and I'll happily take them. If you have any questions, send them along. In addition, I've included in both the workbook and on the slide here, some other resources that you can leverage to take and apply some of these concepts. Resources that I have used to develop this approach, all of which I highly recommend. Looks like a couple folks were asking to resend the workbook. The workbook is going to be in, the link to the workbook is in the emails that just went out. If you're having trouble downloading the updated workbook, just refresh or clear your cache in your web browser, and that will allow you to download the new workbook. All right, everybody, thank you so much for being here today. Like I said, it is my privilege to do this work. After the call, please feel free to shoot me an email and let me know what you thought. What was most useful? What was least useful? What can I do to get better? As you know, one of my winning strategies is to ask for feedback. So I'd be grateful if you can share your feedback with me. And importantly, what else do you need to move yourself, your life, your career, your relationships forward? I am constantly thinking about this stuff and looking to create new, better, more efficient approaches to help you create a life you love. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Have a great rest of the day. Bye.